Hi, and welcome to Industry Night with me, Nycci Nellis, the show that takes you on a deep dive into the happenings of the hospitality industry. Every week, I get to talk to an incredible array of talented people about their passions and their professions. So, a little bit about me, why I get to talk about food all the time. I've been covering the food, beverage, and hospitality scene for the last 20 plus years through a variety of outlets: print, online, TV, radio, podcast, social. 20 plus years of the list are youwanna.com, the online zine that tells you about every restaurant opening, food and wine promotion and happening around the city. And every Sunday, I am on Foodie and the Beast. It's DC's only food and wine variety show on the radio. We just celebrated 16 years on air, which is very exciting. And of course, you follow me at NYCCINELLIS on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Threads, LinkedIn, YouTube, all the things. Follow me because I'm doing all the things. So now, per usual, there is so much going on, and I've been eating, and I've been drinking, and I've been rubbing shoulders and shaking hands. And I've really found myself chatting with some of the very best and brightest in the industry, like today's guest. So much fun. I really do love what I do. So let's go down a little memory lane, my memory lane. If you follow me on Insta, then you see a lot of what I'm doing, but so what? Let's chat about it. It's so much fun. And then I'll be bringing on this week's guest, journalist turned director turned activist, Joanna James. She thinks a woman's place is in the kitchen, and duh, I totally agree. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things. Now, I did mention this last week, but because we had so much going on when we had Tony Tipton Martin on the show, I didn't get into it. But Chefs for Equality was last week. OMG. 150 chefs, 20 mixologists, 13 gorgeously appointed tables by Amaryllis Designs. 5 chefs cooked on each of these tables while people sat there and ate. That doesn't count the 50 stations that other people got to walk around, the VIP champagne and caviar lounge, the drag brunch, which was so much fun, and the heavy SF swag bags. Oh, and then the after party. It is the only chef-led event in the country that raises funds for the LGBTQIA community. Of course, the DC food community came out like insane, and we made a lot of money, and it was great. Oh, and if you did not check it out on Instagram, you should, because my dress was pretty fantastic, if I do say so myself. Oh, and of course, because no industry night show is complete unless I mention Jose Andres, because of course he came at the very end of the event. So if you're playing along, you can now drink because I've said Jose's name. Okay, so your girl loves a high tea, and I just hosted a little tea party at Zinnia in Silver Spring, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I've never been there, and it's ridiculous because it's so darling. It's got a lot of intimate little rooms, fantastic grounds, and like with fire pits. Oh, and obviously a really good selection of teas. And they had a lovely tiered tray with a bunch of snacks. And, if you know me, I'm all about the clotted cream. So give me all the clotted cream. You can check that out on my highlights as well. I kind of just want to hang out at La Bonne Vache, like all the time. This is a little gem of a spot on the corner of Georgetown. And it's literally like walking into a little cafe in Paris. I just want to slather that foie gras terrine on toast and drink my rosé, which is pretty much exactly what I did when I was there. They had to kick me out. And lastly, Rosedale is a new spot by Ashok Bajaj. How much do we love the famed restaurateur? He's the guy behind Brassica and Bombay Club and Sababa. And now he has Rosedale. It's closer to me, which I kind of like. And it's exactly what a neighborhood restaurant should be, right? Like super cash, great pizzas, salads, and Frank Ruta's roasted chicken, which is delicious. Are you feeling hungry? I didn't even talk about my dinner at Dōgon, Kwame's new place, but I'm going to save that tasting trip until next week because I'd really like to get into today's guest. So as I said at the top of the show, Joanna James is a journalist turned director turned activist. She does think of women's places in the kitchen, but not how you might think. And she's behind the film called A Fine Line, and she's also the founder and president of MAPP. MAPP. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization, but what it stands for is M, mentorship, A, advocacy, P, purpose, and the other P, the power of women, MAPP. She says it should be easier for a woman to be a CEO in this country than it is to be a head chef. So I was like, I need to know more. And I was at an event that she hosted and heard her talk. And what Joanna is doing is she's really taking the standard that we all know today, tearing it up into tiny little pieces and demanding and affecting change. So hi, Joanna. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Nycci. Thank you. I wish you could open up for me anywhere and everywhere. That's amazing.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it. So let's start with the movie, right? Because the movie became the movie came first, right? A Fine Line.
Right. So basically, what we say, what started with the movie turned into a movement, turned into MAPP. For me, it was very personal. Growing up, I saw firsthand my mother, a chef. She never called herself a chef, but she's been on the hotline more than anyone else. And restaurant owner now 35 years in. But just the unfair way of trying to grow in the restaurant industry and not really having anyone who had her back other than just her grit and her, determination to do it. And yet she always gave back to her community. She was the first one people ran to. So seeing that growing up and learning even more, especially through my research, being a journalist, when I started to dig into it a little more, I was shocked to learn that less than 7% of head chefs and restaurant owners are women. And that's what...
Is that still... Because the movie came out in 2020, correct?
Yes.
So is that still true today? Is that exactly where we are? Have we just stagnated at 7%?
To be quite honest, no one has the actual figure today. We are trying to embark on a industry-wide survey to get to the bottom of that number, because what that number reflects is not only woman-owned restaurants in the sense of 49% a part owner or, with a business partner or investment group, but an actual restaurateur who operates their restaurant, who's a chef as well. And so that is a figure we're trying to figure out today, what the progress has been, if any, and hopefully some. I can say what we're proud of is in the past 5 years since the film premiered, we premiered on PBS, the national broadcast premiere, with more than 60 million views. We've hosted thousands and thousands of screening events and educational screenings. But in these last 5 years since the film premiered and MAPP was founded, there has been an increase from 19% head women chefs to today more than 25%. So that's telling, because I think, I wish we could take credit for all of that. But what we like to say is we created a sense of a call to action, greater accountability and more programming, and just really making sure people and organizations are doing as much as possible to make that change happen. So, so that's good to.
But do you think also, I really think, and I've said this on this show a lot, I think that the pandemic really changed people in the industry, forget the dining public, but people in the industry were like, yeah, we can't do it like this anymore. So I wonder if your movie coming out when it did culminated with a movement of people, especially women, who were like, I want to have a life. I want to raise my children, but I love my job. I love working in the restaurant. I don't want to have to pick and choose. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, we're forced to choose between the thing we love to do or the people we love. That's what I say. I'm a mother of 3. I see it firsthand. So our job is to change this narrative because it's really been around since the beginning of time. It's a patriarchal system, except today it doesn't benefit men or women. And that's the reason we have a great opportunity here to make some progress. And you're absolutely right. The pandemic exacerbated what was already happening. And especially for women, because, we face the disproportionate burden of being the ones to run to the kids who need to get called out of school for a doctor appointment, being the ones to care for our ailing parents, as well as our children, as well as our staffs and teams, trying to do everything on the home front, the professional front. We can't do it all at once. And I think that is the point. We're not set up in this country in particular for support structures, for an easier, smarter way to operate. And that's why MAPP is so focused not only on the entrepreneurial resources, the workplace practices we can make a difference, but also just as important on the advocacy side. We have to urge our politicians, our policymakers to pass legislation that small businesses just can't afford to do.
Right.
You were with us in DC when we had our annual advocacy summit, and we do this every year in partnership with the National Partnership for Women and Families. And for us, we're super laser focused when it comes down to paid family and medical leave. We're the only industrialized country, the US, that does not offer a national policy for this. So a majority of women, I believe it's 1 in 4 women, go back to work right after having a baby, 2 weeks after. Yeah, and
I gotta be honest, I feel like we've jumped ahead, but here we are. So, listen, I run a women-owned business. I have 8 young women who work for me. One has already had her second child. I do have a maternity leave plan. I can only give her 8 weeks. That's all I can do because that's what my business can afford. And, I'm helping her as much as I can. But it is, I heard another woman restaurateur say to me who has also an amazing program for women. Most of her restaurants are helmed by women chefs and pastry chefs and et cetera, and general managers. But she's like, I'm so glad I can give maternity leave and so glad I could give them this, but damn is it tough when they leave for maternity leave.
Yeah.
It's tough, but it's the right thing, but as women we understand it.
Right. And the thing is, if we have a leadership talent pipeline for women, for diverse people, if we create these different paths towards leadership, we don't feel it as bad, because we're ready. And that's why it's encouraging to see so many of the conversations that have happened after COVID, really. We hosted our first conference right after COVID called Restaurant Reset, because we really felt it was a precipice to say, hey, it hasn't been running right and well for anyone, employers or employees, for so long. Let's figure this out. What's the right business model? What's the right way to do this where everyone benefits? And, no one's really figured it out. It's a tough thing. On every ballot, there's the question of tip minimum wage or not. Everyone's trying to wrestle with this right now. But our job with MAPP is to be super focused on how it affects women and families, because we know in the restaurant industry, it's number one, employs the most single mothers. And when we're talking about creating financial independence, most people, especially immigrants, it's through food, it's through cooking, it's through sharing our traditions and culture. And so we've got to continue to make owning and operating a restaurant accessible. Otherwise, it's going to be a really sad thing when we just see all these big national chains and franchises eat up the independent restaurateur who does it for a love, does it to make people happy.
Well, so let's go back to the movie a little bit. Because you weren't in the movie biz, you weren't in the advocacy biz, excuse me. So what prompted you to do the movie? Where did you get that idea? And then, I mean, you brought in quite a group of women in the industry who really, I think for the first time, were really, really honest about what it meant to be a woman, and at least in the industry. And listen, it's not like there's not like lots of women chef groups. Most of them are either James Beard Award winners or Michelin star winners, or etc. But what was it that what stories did you think as a journalist, I'm not hearing this and it should be a movie?
Well, I wanted to share their personal stories. And for me, like I said, it started with my mother because she provided this all access, view. So that was the central narrative of the film. But like you said, I never in a million years would have ever thought I'd make a movie. I had no movie contacts. I had no funding or budget. It's incredible how we even got it made. But I did have a journalism background. So for me, it was always about, what are the questions to ask and why is this happening? And it happened at a time when I was, it was my first daughter. I was pregnant making the movie. So all of these issues were really resonating with me. And I couldn't believe that I was going through many of the obstacles and hurdles that my mother went through, 30 plus years previously.
Right. And so what did you hear from these women in the movie? Like, what would you say were some of the pivotal conversations that you were having, whether it made the cut or not, where you were like, I can affect change. I can make this organization. Like, can you talk us through that a little bit?
The first and foremost thing I noticed was many of these women were just becoming ready to speak up and say, hey, this isn't right. Because for the longest time, women felt, I have to be like one of the guys. I have to wear my armor, not say I'm a woman, this isn't fair, not try to make change. Let me just prove I'm so good. But what we saw happen was, no matter how good you were, no matter how many times you had to prove yourself at every corner, nothing was changing. Nothing was getting easier. If anything, what we saw, many of these women were still going through some hard times themselves. So that was number one, where literally some of the women who agreed to be in the film, I saw like a metamorphosis, if you will, from the beginning of filming to the end. And that felt great. The other thing was that many of these women realized, if the industry is lacking so much female representation, why is that? And it is outside of my control. So let me try to help. Let's try to come together and speak up and see what we can do. And so, the film used personal stories that I think pulled at people's heartstrings, delving into the big national conversations that we had to have around things like, work-life balance, paid family leave, being a mother, being a businesswoman, wanting to do the thing you love, but feeling like you're pulled in so many directions that by the time it's lunchtime, you're burnt out, So I think it was just really great timing to get into all that.
But what I also think is interesting, and I wonder if you've experienced this or if you heard any of this in the movie, or like how you're seeing the change. Like when I was a young woman, and before I was in the industry, I had this other job. It was actually a job for women. Like the company was for women, headed by a woman. And, my boss was terrific, but she was kind of like, she was a boomer, and she was like,
the queen bee, elbows up.
No, she was like, you all have it so easy. Like I had to bust my ass to get here, and maybe you should have to work hard too. Like she wasn't like an all ships rise kind of person. And I mean, I think we hear now more and more stories about women, older women, who are like, listen, there was only one woman allowed in the room. I couldn't make room for other people, or it didn't occur to me because I wanted to be in the room when it happened, right? Like I think we heard Katie Couric say something to that point. But I think my generation, I'm, Gen X, and I think millennials and Gen Zs, like I think we have different generations that are now like, no, all ships rise. Let's bring them together. So like, how are you seeing that, especially in the movie with the women you talked with? And then how are you doing that with MAPP?
Well, I'm so glad you pointed this out because that's 100% true. I think for the longest time, when I mentioned the queen bee syndrome, that's what we saw happening where, like you said, oh, I only feel like there's enough room for one of us. So I'm going to put my elbows up and make sure it's me and not you. We have since gone far from that, where we realize, look, if we want to make change that actually counts and we feel it and we don't feel like we're, killing ourselves to do the work we love to do, or feel regret because we can't have kids and do the work, or we only have kids and can't do the work, then we got to do it together. We got to uplift one another. We have to be collective and smart, just like for the longest time the boys club was. Well, we need to do the same thing. We need to open doors for each other. We need to say, hey, are you using a good accountant, a lawyer, a PR person? Here's my people. And that's what we figured out. And also, let's be honest, the Me Too movement, that was a huge moment in history when women were saying no more. Women were saying, it's, when you feel so alone and when you feel you don't have anywhere to go to share something that happened that was so traumatic that you were forced to feel it was your fault, that you may have brought it on, that you may be one of the only ones who did it, you're going to stay silent. And so that moment really was so courageous, was such an amazing, remarkable moment because everyone came out and said, this isn't right, held men who were in such high positions of power and influence accountable. And I think it's really something to see where we've come from since then to today. I know with MAPP, for us, it really was one of the best things I hear when I talk to so many women, visiting across the country, events or webinars, different things we're doing. The best thing is when I hear women say, I don't feel so alone anymore. For the longest time, I felt like I was the only one going through this, or I didn't know where to turn. And so the fact that we can be a community, and also in a community in a way that I know my mom needed. Like the truth is, she could not get out of the kitchen. She could not even get out of her restaurant at many times, let alone come to a basketball game of mine or things like that. So we don't need you to show up all the time to network, to be that person. That's not MAPP. MAPP is when you need us, we're here. As long as you're a member and you value the work we're doing, call us, text, DM, email, whatever you need. We're going to be there for you because we hear some heartbreaking stories and we want to do whatever we can to help.
Well, so God, I have so many things I want to say because you spurred some ideas. But let's talk about how MAPP executes. But now I know what I wanted to say. I want to go back to, what's interesting about the Me Too movement is that women did not get out unscathed as well, because many women, two of whom were in your movie actually, they acted like they were one of the guys because that's how they were able to get to where they were. They were older chefs and they got called out on it. You know what I mean? And like they had to rethink. I think it's an excellent lesson for everybody, right? That kind of culture is no longer acceptable. Hopefully it stays that way. It's not acceptable. And you don't have to act like you said, one of the guys, and you don't have to be a yeller and a screamer to get respect. And you don't, these things are really important.
And I think
for both sexes.
Taking that one step further, what I realized at that time as well is if there were more women in ownership and leadership, a lot of times these things don't happen because there is a level of empathy and zero tolerance and respect. And so everything we're talking about and trying to do is really about paving these equitable paths towards leadership so that it is more representative, so that it is more diverse, so that we know in the data that when women are in leadership, they give back to their communities and those around them. So that's, I think, what's important here. And I know, like you mentioned, for instance, April Bloomfield. There was so many interviews that have come out where she shared some of her horrendous personal experience that she went through. And even one part in the movie, she opens up where she says, look, at the beginning, I was only given less than 10%. And then I said, hey, this isn't right. I'm bringing in, anyone knows at the time, without knowing the horrendous things that were happening there at the Spotted Pig, but knowing that cheeseburger, that burger that April had. So the point is that women need to stand up and be that person for each other, but also we have to demand what we know is our self-worth and value, and not take the BS that sometimes is happening.
And so now with the organization, you did the movie and you're like, okay, I can affect change. So how does MAPP function? Like, it's a member-driven organization. I know it's a 501c3, but what do you do and how do you do it?
So, like I said earlier, we function in terms of, I would say, major pillars. The first is mentorship, because we know that in order to keep advancing in your career, you got to know which questions to ask and who to ask them from and how to learn and grow. And that's what I found in my own career as a filmmaker. I didn't know the first thing, but I was learning through people on the job. And so we try to provide that through externships, through stages, through not only one-on-one mentorship, because for us, we feel it's more advantageous to be a little bit more creative. So we do, for instance, monthly virtual mentorship circles where it's more thematic. Maybe 1 month coming up, we're hearing a lot from women who are really established in their career, but they want to go on to try some new things and they want to sell their brick and mortar, but they don't know exactly what's the best way now to come up with my exit plan. And so those are the types of things that MAPP really works hard on, because we know that there's a lot of organizations that say they see the value in mentorship, but it's a really hard thing to execute because, first of all, you have to do a lot of work behind the scenes. Who's the right pairings? Who are the right mentors? How do we create these consistent ways to make sure people show up, because we know how busy and how labor-inducive this industry is. So we're continuously trying to add more when we talk about programming along those lines. Not just the virtual mentorship circles. We started doing live MAPP mentorship mails, which is showing up to woman-owned or woman-led restaurants, inviting top chefs and restaurateurs in the community, private chefs as well. We know that's a real big, career path that's opening. And sometimes it's about creating community and letting people know, look, maybe you know of each other, but you never broke bread together, or you haven't connected on a deeper level. So anytime we host an event or anytime we want to go somewhere new, that's the first thing we do is a mentorship meal and bring people together. And so that's another thing that we do. We talked about mentorship. I want to say externships are huge, because for too long it's been for people who can afford to go on this trip.
And stage, right?
Yes. Well, we're saying no. It shouldn't be based on your economic background or, who you are, where you're from. It's about where you want to go. So we've partnered with Delta Airlines and PepsiCo, providing sky's the limit externships, so that if you're a young woman from Raleigh, North Carolina, from Baltimore, from all these places that we've been, we are creating externships with their dream chefs or restaurant group owners, and setting up the travel, accommodations, everything to make sure they have that access, because we know access is number one. But so we're talking about mentorship, we're talking about community, so that women don't feel alone, so they feel they have somewhere to turn. Sometimes it's a simple question, sometimes it's a heartbreaking, this is what I'm going through, I don't know what to do. Can you hook me up with someone? Can you pair me up with someone? So it's providing a sense of community. It's providing community in the sense of events, because we know that makes a difference. Sometimes you just need to get out and see who you can meet. Become inspired is one of the greatest things we do, and I really do appreciate this skill we have is execute events as producers, as storytellers, where we're talking about the panel, the theme, the conversation, who we want to be involved in this. So by the time you leave, many times you feel inspired to keep doing the thing you're doing, but maybe do it on a deeper level. Maybe go for that dream you never thought you were going to do. So, that's important to us. And lastly, advocacy. Like I mentioned, MAPP is all about advocacy. So we host our annual advocacy summit. And the point of that is to make sure that women who are really good at what they do, are really smart at what they're doing, but have never necessarily been invited to the table to have their voice heard and their experience shared. Well, we're inviting you. And actually, we say no invitation needed. Just show up. Just come. So we'll be doing that again this coming September, next September.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say that's really our major work. And of course, just feeling that women are involved, that they want to engage, that they want to be members to either be a mentee, be a mentor, show up to our conference and learn and become inspired, and just have an organization that is, we say we're national because we know there's some great local organizations. We partner with many of them. They each specify in specific areas. We don't want to compete with anyone. We want to amplify their work. We want to collaborate. We want to help. And we want to keep doing the things we really believe in and are focused on, and hopefully get participation from those organizations as well.
I was going to ask because, Regarding Her has a big membership here in DC and also in LA. And it does make sense for an organization like yours to, work together with these groups, right? Because why recreate the wheel? You're all looking to do different things for the hospitality industry, but specifically for women in the hospitality industry. And I just think it's so important. Can we talk about a little bit more about the Family Act, which I know, is huge for you, and MAPP. And can we talk about what's in there that, is ringing true, and how can those in the hospitality industry incorporate it, right? As we're going through all these changes, we were talking about your experience, my experience, this other restaurateur, a female restaurateur's experience. We know what's needed, but the question is how do we get the businesses who can't sustain the finances of it? How does it work?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest things I always say is it's not fair to hold a restaurant or a small business to the same standard as a corporation or company, and they don't operate on the same spreadsheets. There's no way to make, it doesn't make any sense. And a majority of our small businesses that are independent restaurants are paying more in local, state, and federal taxes than some of those large corporations. So when it comes down to policies like the Family Act, passing paid family medical leave, it really benefits the small businesses because they can't afford to do it out of pocket. It's impossible. Or it's for a very limited amount of time where it doesn't really help the woman either. So this is a type of thing where government needs to get involved. And there's only about a dozen, if that, some are about to get passed. So let's say under a dozen states that have paid family medical leave. So we're talking about 37 or so states that don't. So that's the first thing to call out. You can't do it really if you're not in a state that is not making this a priority. But number two, the states that have passed paid family medical leave, like Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, some of these states, they have done it in a way, like you mentioned, the Family Act, where you don't even notice it because it's something like less than $1 a week from your paycheck. And then the employer puts in some as well. And it becomes like an insurance where it's all chipped in together between the employer, the employee, everyone pooling together so that when the person needs this time off, you can rely on it. And you can only get it if you've been working a certain amount of months within that organization. So it's something that really you have to do through the state or hopefully a national program, because it makes the economics of it work. So no one feels they're overspending for something that should be guaranteed.
That makes sense. I mean, it really does. I just think people, they don't know the math. And so when you don't know the math, it's scary, right? It's like, where's the money coming from? How is the money showing up? Where's it coming? And I think there's a certain sect of people, listen, I always say this about the hospitality industry. One of the biggest problems with it is that the diner feels like they're a part of the hospitality industry because they go to the restaurant, right? Or they go to the farmer's market and buy the food, whatever. They feel that they have an understanding because they are an active participant in it, but they don't understand the business, but they think they do. Do you know what I mean? Like, my mom and dad love to eat out. They have incredible palates. They eat out all over the world. But I'm always shocked when my mom says something like so stupid about, it's just so, it's not stupid. Stupid's a bad way of saying it, but it's so unthoughtful.
No, but I know what you mean.
You know what I mean about the business? She'll be like, well, I mean, we
a
had to
menu
wait.
cost,
Right. We had to wait 15 minutes. They should have given us something. And I'm like, when I'm late, when my doctor is an hour late, I don't get anything for free. So, I mean, you know what I'm saying? I think there's an incredible misunderstanding of the business. I mean, people hear razor thin margins, but they don't know what that means. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think, hopefully that's, people are getting more educated on this because they have to. Inflation is a real thing that has affected now everyone, doesn't matter who you are. And so you see the item on the menu that's jumped in price because it's had to, it can't be that you can get that same chicken for $24 if the restaurateur is meanwhile paying, quadruple for it.
Right.
So, people are understanding things a little bit more, but I think it's our job to keep giving it to them so they realize, like you said, the economics behind it or the reasoning behind it. And I do think you mentioned, Nycci, this is something that crosses both sides of the aisle because if you're a business owner, you want to do right by your staff. You want to be able to recruit and retain talent and not have to close your doors. And you also need to do it in a responsible way. And no one is saying otherwise, whether you're, a Democrat or Republican, everyone can agree to that, I think. And so at the end of the day, for these things like we're talking about, not only paid family medical leave, but affordable, accessible childcare, these things need to be addressed beyond the business owners, beyond the employers, because there's only so much that they can do, and especially when we're talking about the restaurant and hospitality industry.
Right. Well, I think you're really doing the good and hard work, and it's very exciting. How can people get involved? Are the members of MAPP just in the industry? Do you look for people outside the industry to be involved, whether as mentors or as speakers, or how can other people get involved?
Oh, absolutely. Number one, I love that you asked, people outside of the industry. So many of our industry folks need to hear from experts when it comes to marketing, when it comes to what restaurant do you know that has an HR department, right? So if you're in HR and you're in some big corporation, reach out to us. We want to hear from you. We want to share your skills with our members. So anyone who's interested, let alone if we're talking about women's rights and supporting women and families, please be involved. The first step is becoming a member, and specifically for you and your listeners, we wanted to provide an industry give back. So if you decide to join and become a member, you can use the code MAPP friend, MAPP friend, And once you're a member, you get access to all the things we're talking about here, and especially our app, because on our app, I should have mentioned, we have our MAPP Impact.
You have a MAPP app? Okay.
Yes. And so you can download it on any Apple or Android, and all of our resources are there. But to access all of the recordings or curriculum, webinars, you need to be a MAPP member.
Gotcha.
And the other exciting thing coming up for our big 5-year anniversary, which is next year, 2025, we are hosting what we're going to call an epic anniversary conference in Las Vegas, presented by the Win in partnership with Elizabeth Blau and the Women's Hospitality Initiative. So
amazing.
If you become a member, you get a great discount to that ticketed event. And it's all about celebrating you, the women in our industry who a lot of times don't get that recognition and deserve it. And that's what it's about at the end of the day. And we see what happens. We see that many of these women who speak on our panels, who join and engage, end up becoming, there's some great cases where they got on the cover of Cherry Bomb, or they became JBF winners. So it's all about amplifying each other's good deeds and good work.
I love that. All right. Well, tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find MAPP, where they can find the MAPP app. Tell us all that.
So first step is you can go to our website, mappimpact.org, and that's MAPP impact.org. You can also follow us on social media, whether that's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. It's, again, MAPP Impact. And if you download the app on any Apple device or Google device, Android, whatever, again, it's MAPP Impact. And we're just, really happy of the work we're doing and that we're around to do it. So hope you'll join our community.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you joining me today, sharing the work you're doing, because I think what you're doing is incredible. I was so delighted to be at that dinner, to hear what you guys were doing up on the Hill that day, and meeting many of the women chefs and restaurateurs who came from all over the country to, go up on the Hill and knock on the doors and plead the cause, which I think is the lobbying angle. People really forget how important it is. Like, that's how shit gets done. You know what I mean? So
absolutely. And Nycci, can I give a shout out to some of your DC women who have just been incredible partners of ours to do these things we do? Amy Brandwine. That dinner at Centralina was amazing.
She was amazing.
Jamie Leeds. We all know Jamie, and Hank's Oyster Bar. Hollis Silverman Wells with Duck and Peach. And I mean, there's just so many great DC women. And like you said, regarding her, I'm a dame, La Dames d'Escoffier. So it's just great to see how we do this every year. We all come together, and what a culinary hub and fierce force you guys have there. So thanks for having me. It's really been
absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to put you on hold for a second. Thank you so much for joining me, and I want to thank you, the listener, for joining us as well. Everything you heard here today, you can find on the list, areyouonit.com, the online e-zine that happens to tell you everything that's happening in the DMV, but so much more. Don't forget to tune into Foodie and the Beast every Sunday at 11 on 1500. We are 16 years old, and we are very, very happy about it. And follow me at NYCCI, NELLIS on all the platforms, but really on Instagram, because that's where I'm having the most fun these days. And please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the podcast channel. I think that's it. Thanks for joining me, and have a delicious week.
Produced by Heartcast Media.